listening to the Coalmine Canary. Warning: side effects may cause cognitive dissonance.
All right, here we are, video 3, third video about a shadow government, and we left off. We know the NGOs are involved. We know that ESSA and ARA funds were intended to create the framework, and this happened over an eight-year period or so during both administrations. So the wedge was ESSA. It shifted everything to the states, and that was intentional. Obama knew, they all knew that the red states were going to reject it. The infusion of LGBTQ and all of those kind of things, trans and all that kind of stuff. And then they also knew that the blue states would, and then the blue states, they had already begun setting the infrastructure up by passing laws, by installing handpicked, selected candidates into positions of governance, such as school boards, to only hire certain aligned teachers and staff in schools, etc., etc. And this then began the foaming of the broth, so to speak. And anyway, so now we're into the next question, and again, NGOs were involved, and this was a method, and this was predetermined as a method to bypass any gridlock that Republicans would do in Congress. Okay, so I asked the next question. So there's a next logical question, and I challenge AI in what it said. So the resulting landscape. So I said AI, you said in my question, the resulting landscape. Because states hold this authority, conservative states have used that exact ESSA-backed local control to pass laws restricting LGBTQ, while liberal states have used it to permit or encourage them. This kind of goes against the earlier question and response about when I said, is that where schools began getting money for LGBTQIA, gay and trans materials into school libraries and hiring LGBTQIA educators, etc.? AI has initially said no. However, it said, well, it bypassed the states, and then the states did these things, and also NGOs through private nonprofits and philanthropy. But then it said specific federal funds. On the federal side, funding related to LGBTQ student initiatives is usually tied to public health. You see, that's the bypass, rather than education policy. And okay, so now it's part of health classes. That's the Trojan horse, another Trojan horse inside a Trojan horse inside a Trojan horse. It's like the Russian stacking cups or eggs or whatever it's called. Not stacking cups, it's nesting eggs. Okay, so, but they couldn't make a federal policy specific for, this sector of people, this special class and group, because that would be giving them more rights than everybody else. So they had to tie it to public health initiative. Okay, and let's remember, JFK Jr. or whatever descendant he is, John Kennedy is the Minister of Health in the United States now. Okay, but we're going down here. Whoops. So then I challenged him, the resulting landscape of all this, because states had this authority. Now we have division. Republican, this is where it all began. This is why it's 100% of Democrats versus 98% of Republicans. And those three Republican holdouts are rhinos. They're Republicans in name only. They're actually Democrats like Thune, Tillis, Murkowski, okay? And they all say it on their face, yes, I'm for it, I'm for it, I'm for it, and then they do nothing. Because that's exactly how they passed all these laws under Obama to begin with. It has one name on its face, and it seems really good, but actually it's intended for the ultimate evil. All right, well, we're challenging AI in its response, because it says no up front, but then it actually proves my questions correct and actually shows exactly how it's wired, okay, and bypassed and processed and everything. Okay, so I asked the resulting landscape because you said this, because states hold this authority, et cetera, I basically quoted it. And I said that was my point and why I asked my previous question. Second, in the past 8 years, senators like Rand Paul and other Republicans telling that Democrats never spoke out. Oh, I said it's telling that Democrats never spoke out against these policies would expose that such USAID taxpayer dollars were going towards spreading, and here it is. They exposed these USAID projects in other countries as wasteful spending, when they were actually, during COVID, it came out that Fauci was experimenting illegally and unethically on, and by the way, his wife is still there, and she's the one over the ethics committee, I guess, or the head of NIA. She's like somehow above him, or he has to go through her for ethics permission. But anyway, it came out something about puppies and how they were inhumanely treating them and just absolutely horrible experimentations on them, mutilating them and everything else. Well, Rand Paul during this time, they outed, and a lot of Republicans outed wasteful spending before Trump became president, and how all this money was going to NGOs in other countries to perform trans surgeries. Isn't it interesting that somehow at the same exact time that all of that was going on, and you didn't hear about all that until Rand Paul brought it out and called it wasteful spending. You didn't hear about all those NGOs, USAID funneling money to those other foreign locations to do the exact same thing that they were performing and doing in the United States during the Obama and Biden years, which were envisioned by ESSA and these health, quote unquote, health initiatives. But the NGOs were supposedly, or the USAID was supposedly doing that and giving those funds to NGOs in other countries to promote those things. How then did it happen on our own soil? Isn't that interesting that they are in exact parallel alignment with one another during the same time, over the same time period? Do you think this may be a way that they bypassed Congress and the whole American government to institute the shadow government nation that is blue on American soil via all these acts and mechanisms? Okay, well, let me finish my question. This is what I'm getting at in my question. Like, it's buried into the question, but implied in the question. Rand Paul and other Republicans would expose, and it's funny that what I mean by telling that other never spoke out against those NGOs, no those policies and that waste of money going through USAID for these perverse and antithetically anti-American values in other countries. I think even in Muslim countries, they were promoting this. Right? Supposedly. Supposedly. That's key. Would expose that such USAID taxpayer dollars are going towards spreading LGBTQ-friendly and trans propaganda, education, and surgeries, quote, in other countries. Because remember what it said at the top of this conversation in video 1. No, USAID only works internationally. It's the NGOs that then work domestically. Do you see that? We just found a puzzle piece together. So if there is such a thing as a shadow government, and I'm a lot of this language sounds like I'm saying it exists, and I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if it exists, this is the premise from the very beginning. If it exists, this is how it could exist. We're reverse engineering how it could exist, if it can exist, and by what mechanisms it began. Where did it begin, if there is such a thing? I mean, Tulsi Gabbard's the one who brought it out. She literally said it. He was the spearhead. Okay, and it's not her. She was just the acting DNI, right? Director of National Intelligence. So, let me finish the question. Obviously, all those NGOs were formed, applied, and approved for funding during Obama and Biden presidencies. AI says you are entirely correct about the international side of the issue. Republican lawmakers, including Senator Rand Paul and House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee Chairman Brian Mast, have explicitly used congressional hearings and oversight reports to expose and condemn how USAID and State Department taxpayer dollars have been used to fund LGBTQIA plus initiatives, education, and medical procedures abroad. Okay. I mean, all of that come out. It's all public. It's on YouTube. It's in the Senate, live Senate committee hearings. All you have to do is watch them. I 100%, every American should be allowed to watch these Senate committee hearings. In fact, they should be held in the evenings so that people could watch them instead of all those trash TV episode things. Instead of reality TV, they should watch real reality, the Senate committee hearings. I think if they were holding them in the evening, a lot more people would be involved in government and politics and voting. There is a clear documented distinction between how these policies operate domestically versus internationally. Oh, so is AI saying that they did operate domestically? Hold up. And how different federal powers were used. Okay. What Rand Paul and Congress exposed, the international funding, the oversight reports you mentioned, such as Senator Rand Paul's annual Festivus report on government waste and specific House Foreign Affairs. If you haven't read any of that, you should. Go read it. It's mind-blowing. Like, it is, you'll just be astounded. Like, you're going to be like, who allowed this to be a thing? Who voted for this kind of crap? We should be able to vote on these things, policies directly. They should be just like, in local elections, they sort of have amendments that the people vote on locally. Well, we should be voting on this kind of crap. Otherwise, it's taxation without representation. Because if you're not representing exactly what these funds are going for publicly, then it's taxation. You're taking taxes without representation. It's like having drugs prescribed to you and they don't have a insert that warns you about these could be side effects. Right? Same thing here. Everybody, if I were the president, everybody would be, your tax dollars, you would see it. These policies would be on your federal tax forms. You would get a list of them. And then when you filed your taxes, and any kind of return you get or any kind of money that you owe on your taxes, of course, we all pay into our taxes, how your tax money is spent would be on your tax form. For defense, national defense and certain things, Congress divvies that out, right? However, for some of these like public health initiatives, for these kind of USAID, international, what countries we support with how many dollars, all that kind of stuff, everybody should be able to tick that off on their tax forms, and that's your quote unquote vote, but that's your voice in government as well. That your vote is backed by funding. Right? The dollars are backed by your vote. So where the dollars go is backed by your vote, by you check marking boxes on your IS tax forms. That is the ultimate way to not have any more of these, it's gotta be bipartisan and nobody from the Democrat side is going blah, 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 blah. No, as a matter of fact, we could just hold the election with the people right now. Just have a special election on passing the Save America Act. Because obviously these people are not doing their job. Even the Democrats are not doing their job. They're literally aligned with only one sector of their population. That's only the people that agree with them. They don't give two shits about anybody else. Sheets, or pillows about anybody else. Right? So that's how we should rearrange that. We should just have a special election, have everybody go out to the polls and vote for it and get it done one day. Done. We could set the date. We could set up, everybody gets a text on their phone. Everybody's got phone numbers, and hey, go out and vote. Either yes for Save America Act or no for Save America Act. Go get it done. That's it. They don't have time to do all the paper balloting and everything and all that kind of stuff. And you know what? If you don't have an ID, that's your fault. If you find a way. If you want to vote, find a way to get there. We got buses. They got buses. You got friends. You got neighbors. Everybody. You know somebody with a vehicle. Ask, beg, and plead. Find a way. That's not the government's job to find. It's government's job to set up a polling place for you to get to. And that's the extent of their responsibility. You have an opportunity to vote. It's not the government's job to bus you there and do everything else. That's your job and your responsibility. And we've set up local voting stations, and we got voting everywhere. And if you can't get there, that's your fault. Forget about mail-in ballots. I mean, even senior citizens' homes have buses. So there's no excuse in today's modern age to not be able to go and get yourself to a voting poll, a voting booth. No, there's no excuse. We could have this done tomorrow and just get it done. Hey, if you're gonna just be assholes like you are, and I meant that like Hass avocados, and you're gonna be those kind of assholes, let me pronounce that a little better for you, then we're gonna fix that. You're violating the electorate. You're violating U.S. citizens' right to have a voice in their government by not representing them. And then after we vote for it, everybody who didn't do their job, see ya, sayonara, baby, you're out. That's dereliction of duty. You swore an oath to represent your people in your district, and if it passes by 85 or 90% or 75, if it passes by 75%, then you didn't represent your people like you should. That includes Republicans and Democrats. So that's how we need to get serious about stuff. And the American people are in charge of their own government. Now, the shadow government is the opposite. They're only up there, and in 100% cult-like fashion, the Democrats, besides Fetterman, the Democrats have aligned themselves with the shadow government, aided and abetted it. And if you don't align with them, then they want to get rid of you. They're only representing the people who align with their opinion. Well, what I think, and that's the video I did last night. Senate committee hearing, AOC and some other low IQ, immature Democrat in a Senate committee hearing. That post will be up as well. You can look for it on my page. It'll be up. And anyways, anyhow, I'm not going to even give it a second on this video, but you can watch it. So the people should be able to represent themselves. There's a clear documented distinction between... Okay, so they outed the Festivus report. That's what I was saying. I was saying you need to go read the Festivus report because it'll blow your mind. That's what I was saying. I got off on a tangent again. Sorry. So after hearing successfully uncovered that under the Obama and Biden administration, billions of global initiatives and specific USAID grants were directed toward overseas LGBTQ and gender programs. Now, that's only one leg of the journey. Because what happens with NGOs? NGOs come from overseas, and then like we saw in video 2, they go directly to blue states and to red states. They go directly to school districts that they know in advance have Democrat, DNC friendly operatives, hand-selected elected officials like school boards, principals, educators, librarians, who are going to say, yes, please give me those free materials. The NGOs come from overseas into the United States domestically and operate. The billions of dollars from USAID can only operate internationally, so they go out to international waters. And that's why I brought it up earlier. Isn't it interesting at the beginning of this video? Isn't it interesting that in parallel, the same time these funds were initiated, earmarked for billions of taxpayer dollars into other countries, and this was what Mast and Paul were bringing out. Like, who voted for this? If you watch any of those hearings, the American taxpayer didn't vote for that. This is waste. It's fraud and abuse. But then, those NGOs that it went to internationally, guess what they did? Guess where the principal, because most communities internationally, they don't want any of this trash. They don't want any of that trash in their school systems, and so where do they have to find a market for it? In the United States. Who's going to be open to it? The Obama shadow government. Because guess what? All of this. Why is it only that Barack and Michelle Obama began this initiative, and no other president, male-female couple in presidential history instituted this? Isn't it? Don't you feel like that's a little bit strange? Is it any wonder that Joan Rivers died soon after she brought out that Michelle was trans, and that everybody in Hollywood knew it? Literally said that on camera. Everybody knows it. I don't know why they try to hide it. I mean, trans has been a thing in Hollywood for a very long time. Very long time. Just look at the Adam's apple of many of your favorite actresses that you think are so hot. Okay. So isn't it funny that I'm not saying she is or isn't. He is or isn't Michael LaVaughn Robinson. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is people have said it. People probably have more knowledge about it than I do, or I could obtain, or closer to it in degrees of separation than I am. And there's a lot of good evidence for it. It's hard to deny a lot of the evidence. Some of the videos. We know there's all kinds of the WNBA is infected with trans men. Just look at our Adam's apple. Look at the size difference. Look at the shape difference. Look at the strength difference. Sophie Cunningham's brought it out. Caitlin Clark's brought it out. Michelle Griner brought it out. Michelle Griner outed himself. Wait, no, Brittany Griner. Sorry, Brittany Griner. Not Michelle. Brittany Griner brought it out himself. Showed it. Walking around with his shirt off. It's a freaking dude. Absolute obvious. Adam's apple. No boobs. Man of a chest. A man's chest. Now, could it be on hormones to try to, pretense? But that's neither here nor there. What I'm saying is, all of this has happened in parallel with these USAID funds going internationally. And they used LGBTQ as health policy in the United States to open the door, to bypass gridlock in Congress about it. Okay. Bypass the old male-female dichotomy, and then to begin gender studies and all of those other kind of programs. GLSEN is an international NGO, right? I don't know. Look it up. I bet they don't operate. Well, they may have offices domestically, but they are probably corporately, internationally. But that's all I'm saying. Why has it only ever happened in U.S. history under the Obamas? Supposedly Michelle is trans. Well, Michelle is a trans man, and Obama's a homosexual. Supposedly the conspiracy theory goes, the whole family is a fake, and it's all out there. And Joan Rivers basically told everybody that was the truth. She was so matter of fact about it, there's no way she was lying and making a joke. Obviously she wasn't making a joke. And it was just so perfunctory, and it was honest, Anyway, it's hard to deny, okay? And all of these factors, and even all this LGBTQ trans crap going into being shot like a needle from NGOs into the arm of Americans via blue state divergence. So, examples of the specific real-world grants exposed. Okay, here we go. So, medical procedures. Isn't that interesting? There were never, ever such kind of medical procedures even, I don't even think imagined until all of these USAID funds went internationally to other countries. And then all of a sudden it showed up on American soil. Isn't that interesting? Media and education, $32,000 grant in Peru to produce a transgender-themed comic book. Huh. And then all of a sudden it starts showing up in blue state libraries all over the country. Huh. So it costs $32,000 to create a comic book and produce it. That means they printed it and everything else. So they couldn't have used the money, USAID, they couldn't have got funding directly in the United States for such a thing, because that's not what the federal government does. The federal government has to apply everything to all citizens equally, right? That's what the federal government ensures, that all citizens are treated equally under the Constitution of the United States. So you couldn't make all these special programs for specific sexual orientation. That would be discrimination against everybody else, right? You'd have to give all those grants to every single person in the country. But unless you use a mechanism like USAID to support it in other countries as goodwill and aid, as humanitarian aid. And that's why it was a health issue, because then it can become humanitarian aid to other countries. And the truth of it is, all they did was set up a printing press for these propaganda materials to be brought back into the United States through NGOs. Medical procedures. Guatemala explicitly designated for transgender healthcare, hormone therapy, and gender-affirming surgeries. So there you go. Now you can go abroad and you can have all of your surgeries abroad. Okay. Just like they go abroad to get other medical therapies. I mean, it all makes sense if it's healthcare, right? And the only way you can call it healthcare is if you tie it to the medical industry. Meaning, we're going to cut your boobs off. The Muslims do that. The Muslims are known to have mutilated women like that, cutting their breasts off. The Nazis did that. Cut women's breasts off. Well, if it's all just medical procedure, then what did it matter? They were just giving them, gender transformations. Well, it was against their will, but, it's all just for their health, right? For better health care. No, it's completely preposterous. It's absolutely disgustingly preposterous. Media and education, so it costs $32,000 to produce a transgender themed comic book, which then found its way back on U.S. library shelves. And 47,000. I'm not saying that specific one, but I'm saying those materials found themselves on U.S. states' libraries. And $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia. I wonder. Advocacy campaigns. Over $3.3 million for regional LGBTQIA activism initiatives across the Caribbean. Okay. Isn't it funny that we have all these LGBTQIA activist groups rising up in America at the same time, in parallel with those grants? You know what? I haven't seen any. No, it could be that I just haven't seen it. Have you seen any videos of these LGBTQIA? Put links in the comments. Have you seen any LGBTQIA plus activist marches in any Caribbean countries? Anywhere? Have you seen any videos of those? Or how about, have you seen any press from this Colombia transgender opera? Have you seen any press about how successful it was and how much the country adored it and how many thousands of people lined up outside the door to get in, but they couldn't, and they had to set up screens everywhere in the public square so people could watch the opera for free? You see anything like that? I haven't. I would think it would be like super hyper popular news because, you know, we spent, what did it just say above? How many billion? Billions of global initiatives and specific USAID grants. Billions of global initiatives. Such as, for example, they included these. Well, if it's so popular everywhere, how come we didn't see videos everywhere about it? Or how come we didn't have like Sky News or CNN or anybody there at those events reporting it? What a great success it was. Oh no, they were too busy reporting about it in the United States. Isn't that interesting? Huh. None of those funds were allowed to go domestically to the United States because USAID is all for international only, according to AI. Well, why did all of it pop up and why did the only news about it come from US states, blue states? Isn't that interesting? Huh. All the activism. Where are all the activists marching in the streets and waving all their flags and doing all their sexual, disgusting, depraved show and pompous and all the stuff they put on in the streets in front of children? How come it's only in the United States that we see that? Isn't that weird? These programs are part of a formal foreign policy strategy initiated by a 2011 executive memorandum from President Obama, which ordered all U.S. international aid agencies to use foreign assistance to advance, my God, all U.S. agencies to use foreign assistance. All U.S. international aid agencies use foreign assistance. To use foreign assistance. Do you get that? George Soros, he ordered all international aid agencies. How the heck can the president do that when all of those? That's taxation without. You want to have a no kings movement? Why didn't we have a no kings movement when that decree went out? Because that's a king move right there. He ordered it. Who is Obama? He's a representative of the people of the United States. Well, Did 100% of the people want it? Did the majority of the people? Did 51%? Did 50.01% of the U.S. population agree with that decision? Hell no. So this was a personal decision, and this is how you sue Obama under 42 U.S.C. 1983, because that's no longer a legitimate decision of his office. That was a personal decision, because a legitimate decision of his office has to consider the majority and the minority across all sectors of the population. And it has to be distributed equally. No, this was an order to all international aid agencies to use foreign assistance. That's what gets me. He ordered them to use foreign assistance. That's dollars from foreign powers not aligned with United States policy, traditions, practices, histories, culture. Wow. To advance, my God, bro. That right there is full stop. Public square hanging of this treasonous individual. Literally telling them to take money from foreign powers. Ordering them. The funding for these international NGOs was significantly scaled up during the Biden administration. So the USAID money went to international NGOs, and as we said in video 2, we proved, or with AI's assistance, we showed that, well, we proved it, right? The mechanism to get those materials were that NGOs were giving it free, like we cited one of those, right? Organizations. And the Rainbow Library and all of that kind of stuff. Those are all funded by NGOs, international NGOs. And where did the money come from? Well, it's literally shell game operation, because USAID goes out internationally, it funds a NGO set up in another country, and then the money comes directly back to the United States. Or those books, those comic books, come directly back as free materials to libraries and schools of blue states and red states. Liberal-leaning schools in red states. These programs were part of a formal foreign policy strategy initiated in 2011, executed by President Obama, which ordered all U.S. international... Okay. In early 2025, note, the Trump administration enacted a complete 90-day freeze and sweeping cuts to these specific USAID discretionary grants abroad. Well, why? Well, because it was money laundering. Technically it's not money laundering, right? Technically it's not a shell game. Technically it's legal. It's legit. Technically it's legitimate, right? But it's not. Especially if his executive memorandum told all U.S. international agents to use. If that's a true statement, that's pure treason. Because then you're telling everybody to accept money from foreign powers that are misaligned with U.S. policy and governance. But the point is, now we've showed and proven exactly how the shadow government operates. And Trump shut it down. Well, Trump's administration, right? And Trump's enacted it, 90-day freeze to specific. And this is why they had such a hissy fit. Because more than that, it funded these election systems to come from foreign countries into the United States. It funded money to go to Act Blue and then to be distributed to candidates through micro grants to political candidate through micro donations. That's all been outed. That's why that chick was in Congress in a Senate hearing. I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth in all my criminal activity to overthrow the United States of America. She's sitting up there so smug and laughing about it because she's busted. She's caught. That's how, narcissists and sociopaths, they can't keep a straight face. Well, wait. Yeah, sociopath, psychopath. Anyway. They can't keep straight faces. It's funny to them when they get caught because they have no empathy. They have no compassion. They have no guilt, remorse. And they think it's a comedy when they get caught. That somebody was smart enough to catch them and they think they're smarter than everybody else. That's how narcissism is. That's how it does. But anyway, so why the funding mechanisms for domestic versus international programs differ. The core of your point highlights a major paradox in how federal policy works. And again, I'm just asking questions, right? They're obvious questions to ask. Every output the AI gives. It's like begging the question. The response begs the question. And I'm just asking it. The executive branch used completely different legal paths, and this is all under Obama and Biden, by the way, to advance these social goals domestically versus internationally. While the administration could use USAID to directly hand cash grants to international NGOs for programs, it could not use USAID or standard K-12 education laws to do the same thing inside American classrooms. And we've already talked about that. But let's see the mechanism. Direct federal, USAID, State Department, direct federal grants bypass foreign governments to fund local NGOs on the ground. Okay, so there's where it begins to lose scrutiny. It bypasses the foreign government as well by going directly to local NGOs. The domestic strategy. The federal government passes block grants to states. States retain final spending authority. Okay, that's domestically under Title IX. We talked about that in video 2. Congressional control. Bureaucrats utilize broadly defined foreign aid budgets with less line-by-line oversight. That's for USAID. Congress, and this is domestically, right? Okay, domestic strategy. ESSA and Title IX. Congress explicitly blocked direct federal mandates on local school curriculums or book buying. The strategy used direct funding the executive. Okay, summary. ESA decentralized control. That way they could overtake local states, like the 17 blue states, through local elections, like governor down to school boards, and then hiring staff and aligned members. The summary. Your observation is accurate. The Obama and Biden administrations heavily utilized the federal purse via USAID to build, approve, and fund an international network of LGBTQ plus advocacy and medical initiatives. Domestically, because Congress fiercely guarded local control over schools, the administration could not directly duplicate those USAID-style cash handouts for local school libraries. Instead, laws like ESSA shifted power entirely to state level, unintentionally paving the way. It was just by accident. All AI is so funny sometimes. Anyway, unintentionally paving the way. It has to say it like that, right? It can't direct. Oh my God, the propaganda. It's so deep. My God. Unintentionally paving the way for the exact regional legal battles over school materials being witnessed today. Oh, okay. So I didn't finish the sentence. Okay, I get it. No, but everything they did was very intentional and it was premeditated, pre-planned, way in advance. Okay, way in advance. So then I asked, So then I challenged again. Well, I asked for clarity or whatever. I tell AI, I type in, you said, quote, could not directly duplicate those USAID style cash handouts for local school libraries. But if now again, the response begs the question. But if USAID NGOs had offices, printed and created materials in other countries, then much of that money and materials could shift back to the U.S. to now again. This is a proposition I'm requesting information about. Then much of that money and materials could shift back to the U.S. to bypass federal laws and protection via domestically founded advocacy groups to give free LGBTQIA materials to schools. Now, this also parallels how Antifa gets funded. Antifa is literally funded by USAID. And I guarantee you, these George Soros this is how they're linked. Now, I don't know that. I haven't done a deep dive into that, but I guarantee you, if I were to do a deep dive, I'm sure I would find that connection. It's probably pretty easy to see on the surface, because you know what? They never do anything different. It's always the same playbook. It's just, reconstituted to fit different scenarios. Anyway, two schools and fund rights activists. So fund rights activists and protesters domestically. Right? All the LGBTQIA marches and everything else that's like cropped up over the last 10 years, ever since Obama became president and instituted all this. Now, that's what the ESSA was for. It was to create the separation from America and the constitutional republic form of governance into its own separate state. And this is why I said in the series on Bernie Sanders that the Obama Library is a compound. I 100% believe that's the central government of the international cabal that works together through Obama and his shadow government. That literally is going on right now. It hasn't ended. He's still alive, and he still has all the networks and the connections and everything else. Okay, and that boat picture, that with that abused Asian girl. And what is that Hollywood actor's name on that boat with him? Grabbing his pants, putting his belt back on, and that poor girl looking out there, just desperate cry for help in her eyes. They're lucky. They're lucky I'm not president. I would have no problem calling some military friends and getting them on the phone and going to have a little talk, going to spread some influence. But that's me. And Tulsi Gabbard's already brought it out, so me and Tulsi, we would just I'd go with her. We go get this done. Just go have a little talk with, I forget whoever that Hollywood actor is. He don't make movies anymore. And Obama. We'd have a little powwow, a little round table. But hey, I don't know. Maybe somehow they don't know. Maybe they don't have time to do deep dives on what I'm doing. I don't know what Tulsi, maybe, I don't know. Who knows why they haven't done a full court press on this. But, so that was my question. I said, they could not directly, but what about indirectly? That's basically what I'm saying. And AI says, your point hits on a major concept. Now, I had no idea this next response. I had no idea these things existed. And probably you don't either. But look, it's grepped. Again, AI just greps what it can as fast as it can that's relevant to the answer, the best way that it can, and then puts it together and produces an output within seconds. Okay? So if it's pulling this from the web and responding, then there's a good chance that these things exist. It can't reason. So that's why sometimes when it says no and then it provides more context down below, it's actually proving itself, the opposite of what it says. Or if it says yes, like your point hits on them. That's why you have to check everything yourself. You have to check all the sources. And before I printed this out, I'd already checked all the sources of each response to make sure that, the majority of them were 100% legitimate sources. Your point hits on a major concept regarding how political movements use organizational networks, and you are describing what policy experts call an ideological or operational feedback loop. While federal dollars cannot legally cross that line directly, ideological. That's why his whole presidency is illegitimate. He had a personal ideological intent that he wanted to impose on everybody. That was why he became president. It wasn't to become president of the United States of America. No. It was a personal ideological intent. And then he wanted to educate everybody else into that intent. Exactly what Syed Barr and his education minister, who was Ilhan Omar's father, okay, whatever, I forget his name now, but go look at the Bernie Sanders. That's exactly what they did in Somalia. Scientific socialism. But it goes beyond that ideology into sexual orientation. And because it was his and Michelle's transsexual orientation, this is the only thing that makes sense. So this is why I'm like saying it as if, right? As if it's true, even though it could be, I'm still saying it could be false, but as if it's true because it's the only thing that makes sense. They're the only couple in history of the United States to try to foist this onto the people of the United States, who by and far, vast majority would reject it overnight, instantly. That's why they had to do it in this manner with this operational feedback loop that is telling us about these international pipelines. To bypass Congress, because at least the Republicans, but I guarantee you, it would have been, at least Manchin and there was another guy with the name S. God, at least those two guys would not have voted for it, because they voted as representatives of the United States. They didn't vote as representatives and cult members of the Obama ideology, which was socialism and scientific socialism. That's because that's what they got in Kenya from USAID when it all moved over there from Somalia, after it left Somalia. Okay, so the mechanism of this network operates through specific channels, bypassing direct federal spending bans to influence American schools. There it is in black and white. That's the pipeline. Okay, that's almost another hour, and I have another follow-up question, so I'm going to try to get through this real quick. The strategy pipeline. Why local offices don't matter. It doesn't even matter if they have local offices. You noted that if an NGO has overseas operations, they could print materials there and ship them back. Well, that's why they had those funds in Peru to produce LGBTQ comic book. And in practice, they do not need to physically ship boxes of books across borders. Instead, they share digital infrastructure and intellectual property. The global local toolkits. Oh God. A curriculum or inclusive library guide designed by an NGO using federal capacity building funds for a project in Europe or Latin America can easily be uploaded to a shared server. Oh my God. Maybe this is why Hillary Clinton dumped all of her servers, right? Before she had to go before Congress the first time and be questioned about emails and all that kind of stuff. Maybe that's why she dumped all that. Wow. Because they literally had global, local shared servers with foreign nations while she was Secretary of State. My God, to think. Instant domestic adaptation. The domestic arm of that same NGO or a closely allied U.S. group can download the framework, print it locally using private domestic corporate donations. George Soros, right? And distribute it to American school boards. My God. The multi-pocket funding loop. The primary reason federal laws cannot easily stop this is because large multinational NGOs use fungible funding sources. And if you go back to the secret Chinese bank account, allegation that's supposedly just a fictional made-up meme by Nick Shirley, or not by him, but with him in the meme, I did a deep dive into whether that's even possible or not. All of that fungible comes up over there. Wow. Federal overnight strictly dictates that a USAID grant can only be spent on the specific foreign project it was approved for. Exactly. That's why they were tagged as they were. They could only be used for LGBTQ materials. My God. And I'm not, you can be whatever you want in life. What I'm saying is that it violates the principles of American governance. That's what's the my God about it. That's what's the astounding part about it. That in order to do this in order to impose his own personal and Michelle's own personal ideology on the whole country, this is how they went around Congress to do that. Because you can't enact a federal law that's for a specific sexual orientation. That's not how the federal government works. And that Obama knew all this before going in. That's why they created the ESSA, to decouple the states from federal oversight. And then they funneled it into the U.S. education system to destroy the minds of children. This is a war. This is a war on your children in public school. On America's children. To destroy their lives. And I'm not saying they can't just grow up to be gay and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that. But it's no longer their choice to do that when they're being groomed to do that. In violation of education mandates in America. But because they decoupled it through ESSA and allowed the states to do it, then they got all the blue states to 100% and do this. And then in where laws were restricted in red states, they still had liberal-leaning school districts that still did it. They're still there. This is a single man's ideology. That's what kingship is. A single man's ideology. This isn't a federal government. This isn't in operation of American constitutional principles. Well, this is a man who got in power and decided to take over the U.S. government. Billions, it said. Billions. Okay? And then here's the pipeline, I guess. So here's the model. However, a multi-pocket funding model easily circumvents this restriction, which means the U.S. government. Federal government, USAID, to restricted foreign grants, international arm of NGO, freeze up baseline cash, and then private, corporate, and wealthy donors funnel unrestricted cash to domestic arm of NGOs, and then free school materials and activist training on domestic soil. Anti-American propaganda and activism on American soil. By securing federal grants to completely cover their overseas operations, the NGO frees up its private donations, corporate sponsorships, and foundation money. Instead of spending their private cash abroad, they can redirect 100% of those private unregulated millions into the United States to manufacture free materials for schools and bankroll domestic activists. My God. So your tax dollars, without your representation, went specifically to LGBTQIA organizations. And then the money that the funds to fund their operations. So then free philanthropy, free dollars that weren't sent by the U.S. government to those organizations internationally then could come back domestically without scrutiny and bypassing the whole U.S. government. And you, the citizen. And when I say U.S. government, I'm bypassing you and the will of the people. The King, Obama, bypassed the will of the whole country to benefit less than 10% of it. And foist it and force it onto the 90% because he decreed it in his executive memorandum to accept foreign dollars. That's how it came in. That's what we said in video 2, to accept the foreign dollars, or maybe it's the beginning of this video. Recognizing, so then when they return to U.S. to work for domestic K-12 advocacy groups like GLSEN, formerly GLSEN, GLSEN, they bring that highly advanced federal optimized playbook directly into American school board disputes. Is anyone wonder why that people went to jail for being parents under the Biden-Obama administrations? 2025-26 policy crackdown. The reality of this exact feedback loop is precisely why the political landscape shifted so dramatically following the 2024 election. Because Donald Trump, and that's why they came out, we don't want no king, you can't shut us down. The king, Obama, is the one who decreed it. And Trump, as elected by the United States citizens through election process, the actual constitutional republic process of governance, in a contract, right? That's their contract to represent the people of the United States, and his contract. He shut it all down because King Obama is the actual one who put it in place by his own executive memorandum decree to allow foreign dollars to flood United States public schools. And that's what this just showed us. All right, we're going to stop there. There's going to be a fourth video. That's 1 hour long. We're going to go to the next question. But, so recognize, 90-day freeze and all of discretionary funding. If you are, blah, blah, blah. It just says, do you want me to look at this? All right, here we go. I'm going to pause here, bring it back to it in video 4.
You've been listening to the Coalmine Canary. The canary has left the building. I repeat, the canary has left the building.